I'm going to tell you a story. Back in elementary school, a mini Diego found himself in the school's library, where he was in the dinosaur book section unsurprisingly. No one had gone in that section more than Diego, because everyone else didn't like dinosaurs and were therefore inferior to Diego's power. Anyways, going back to reality, Mini Diego was actually a bit tired of the selection they had here. You may be asking, what? How could you possibly get tired of dinosaurs? You have to understand that he was in 6th grade, the final grade in elementary school. From 1st to 5th grade, he's been up and down this small section and gazed his eyes at every picture and words these books had to offer. So by the time he had reached his final year in this school, he was ready for a change, something different. All of these books were very much grounded in reality. They were informational and educational for the most part. It was time for a little adventure. Scouring the several other areas in the library, Diego would finally make his way to the science fiction thriller section. There, he would see a book cover at the corner of his eye that grasped his attention. Diego could spot a dinosaur anywhere, and in this section, he found this book, Paul Zindel's Raptor. And within the pages is a story that Diego wasn't prepared for. It was so incredible that he forgot about it all these years and wants to revisit it as a Halloween special for his channel. Hello and happy Halloween everyone. I initially had plans to make some larger videos to celebrate the holiday, but some unexpected things happened in my personal life that kind of delayed my plans a little bit. And because of that, I actually wasn't going to do anything for Halloween at first. But I love this holiday so much and I always love making content revolving around it, so I figured I would finally take the time to cover a topic that I've had on my list for a while now. Raptor is a dinosaur horror book that I remember reading back in elementary school, and I remember absolutely loving it at the time. But I didn't realize there was so much of the story that I had forgotten until I read it again for the sake of this video. For those of you that don't know, Raptor is a 1998 young adult horror book written by Paul Zindel. And this is what he was best known for. Zindel specialized in making horror, thriller, drama, and/or sci-fi based stories for a young adult audience. As far as Raptor goes, it's actually a part of a greater series called the Zone Unknown series, a horror-based anthology series with each book having different characters facing different threats. In total, the series consisted of 6 books, with Raptor being the 3rd one. Raptor is about a teenage boy and girl that are tasked to look for an egg by a cave that the boy's father found it in. But he ended up losing it after being attacked by the mother of that egg, which is a Utah raptor that resides in that very cave. But I'll leave the synopsis here because I think it's best for you to experience the story for yourself. I'll leave the links to all of the places you can buy and read it, and you can just come back to the video later. But without keeping you guys waiting for too much longer, let's take a look at Raptor. Our story begins with Professor Norak, a paleontologist who's working on a dig in Utah. But this specific day was his day off, and he's spending it exploring the caves and abandoned mines within a nearby mountain. With him is a mule that's carrying all of his stuff, and is walking alongside him as they're making their way inside the cave. There, he finds large scratch marks and a dinosaur nest covered with greenery and vegetation. At first, he thinks this is a joke being played on him by the paleontology students he's working with at the dig. He examines and handles the nest and finds that there are actually eggs within it, but even then, he still thinks this is all an elaborate prank being pulled on him and that the eggs were fake. Despite this, Norak takes one of the eggs and realizes this is no prank, as the mother of that nest finally shows up and she's not too happy to see her nest being tinkered with. A large reptilian-like animal attacks the intruder by first pouncing on and killing the mule. As she is ripping the mule apart, Norak attempts to make his escape with the egg, but is soon chased after by what he concludes to be a raptor. More specifically, a Utah raptor. He continues running, but in typical horror fashion, right as he gets to the mouth of the cave, Norak ends up tripping and falling, and the raptor catches up to him and manages to lift him up with her forelimbs, and then pins him to the ground. But the raptor doesn't kill or attack him, but instead studies him, and it's because he's still holding her egg, which is what she was really going for. Then she begins to claw and roar at Norak, but her roars end up causing an avalanche within the mouth of the cave. This causes the raptor to let go of Norak, and Norak to let go of the egg. The Utah raptor mother retreats, the egg gets lost in the rubble, and Norak gets knocked out, with the last thing he sees being the severed head of the mule tumbling down the hill near him. Sometime later, Norak is found by a couple of local natives who take him to get medical help. but because of Norak's severe condition and them living in a smaller town that doesn't have the proper medical resources for him, he has to be transferred to a hospital in Salt Lake City. Norak's wife and son are notified and they meet him at the airport. Norak's wife decides to go with him to the hospital, but insists that their teenage son, Zach, should stay behind and take care of things at home. Before they go though, Zach's father tells him about the discovery that he made, but doesn't really specify on what exactly, as he wants to keep it a secret. All he tells Zach is to go back to where they found him to look for the discovery, and he'll know what he's talking about once he sees it. But more importantly than anything else, whatever he does, he warns him not to go inside the cave. Zach's father then goes into shock and they fly off to Salt Lake City, while Zach stays behind. Nearby are the couple of natives that found Zach's father unconscious by the cave, who were there to see him off as well. Zach actually knew them, as one of them was a teenage girl named Yuta that Zach had befriended at school, and the older male that she was with was her Uncle Larry Ghost Coyote. Zach asked Yuta if she could take him back to the spot where they found his father. After she gets permission from her uncle, she gets on his motorcycle with him and they head back to the cave entrance, where they not only find the severed head of the mule and the aftermath of the avalanche, but they also find the giant egg that his father had found earlier. Zach was certain that this was the discovery that his father was talking about and decided to take it with him. In his mind, he figured it maybe belonged to a new species that his father may have discovered. Yuta heavily objects to this, who's insistent that interfering with nature will have consequences to it. But knowing what this discovery could do for his father, Zach takes it anyways. The pair make their way to Zach's house to drop off the egg before taking Yuta home. And while they're getting settled inside, the egg begins to hatch. Inside, a green reptilian-looking creature emerges from the egg, and they continue to think that it's some kind of new species of lizard or something. But then Zach realizes what it really is: a baby dinosaur, and a loud one at that. Because this baby makes a very loud honking-like sound, Zach decides to name it Honker. And upon realizing what this animal actually is, Zach is even more adamant in keeping it for his father's sake. Zach and his parents used to live in LA, and the reason why they're in Utah is because Zach's father's paleontology job took them there. From what it sounds like though, it's more of a permanent thing rather than a temporary thing. However, Zach longed to be back in LA and saw Honker not only as a way for his overworked father to gain some success from his job, but also as a way for him to go back home. And Honker seems to be getting comfortable around them, especially since he's imprinted on Zach. Zach feeds Honker frozen meat that he seems to enjoy, and he even befriends Zach's dog, whose name is Picasso. For a moment, all seems calm until there's some commotion outside. It doesn't sound all that loud, so maybe it's a raccoon messing around with the garbage. Then the commotion gets louder. Whatever is out there, it's definitely bigger than a raccoon, and it's made its way to the front door. Zach looked through the peephole. All he could see was a silhouette of some kind of large animal standing at the front door. They would soon find out that it was Honker's mother looking for him. Earlier in the story, she had been frantically looking around for a missing egg after Zach and Yuta showed up near the cave entrance. She managed to track him all the way back to Zach's house, and obviously she isn't too happy about that. She starts clawing the front door down without struggle, causing Zach and Yuta to grab the dog and baby raptor and retreat back farther into the house. The mother Utah raptor makes it inside and chases Zach into his parents' room, where she nearly manages to get him until she finally notices Honker. Because Honker imprinted on Zach, it actually hasn't registered to him yet that the large dinosaur attacker is his mother. It's funny because Picasso and Honker got loose from Yuta and literally went into the room and started biting the mother's heel along with barking and snapping at her. Of course, as you can imagine, she isn't the least bit fazed by this, and unfortunately, she claws Picasso away from Honker, which kills the poor dog. Nah, I'm just kidding. Yuta makes her way back into the living room and Picasso follows behind, so he's completely fine. The mother raptor's real focus is on Honker, who eventually realizes what this monster was and runs out the front door with his mother chasing after him. Zach takes Yuta and Picasso and hides in the bathroom. Just when things sound all calm, Honker appears at the open bathroom window. Zach grabs him, but it isn't long until the mother comes bursting through the window to try and get at them. But Yuta realizes that the raptor is nocturnal and turns on the light, which burns the raptor's sensitive eyes. They make their way out of the bathroom and try to turn on every light in the house so that they can blind the mother. When she barges out of the bathroom, the plan somewhat works, but Honker gets away from the two somewhere during all of this and runs towards his mother, to which she picks him up with her mouth and runs out where the door used to be. Now, most people would probably just leave it at that, right? Like, holy shit, you not only just saw a real-life dinosaur, but you survived an encounter with it. Surely you'd never want to go through something like that in your life again, right? Well, not for Zach, because it seems that he himself bonded with Honker and thinks that his mother will eat him or something. But really, the main reason why he wants to go after Honker is because he wants to keep his father's discovery safe and away from the wrong hands. Anyways, Zach is so determined to get Honker back that he's prepared to go down into the caves themselves to retrieve him. But of course, Yuta thinks it's a stupid plan, as any normal person would think. But seeing how determined he is and not willing to change his mind, Yuta thinks that they should at least tell someone about their encounter. And she knows just the person and takes Zach there. While that's happening, we're introduced to another character that's technically already been introduced in the story already, but he's only really been mentioned and hasn't actually shown up to any of the events that has occurred up to this point. This new character is another paleontologist whose name is one that I'm gonna butcher, Dr. Bonide? I don't know, I really don't know, but he does have a nickname which is Dr. Bones, which he actually gave to himself and is what I will be referring to him for the rest of this video. Dr. Bones is the human antagonist of this story. Basically, he's Zach's father's boss who runs the dig that they're working at, and he's not a very nice guy at all. Dr. Bones is a man whose main goal in his line of work is to get famous and rich with his discoveries. So much so that anyone that talks to the press about the digs they're working on gets in trouble by him because his rule is that he's the only one that's allowed to talk to them. Zach's father learned that the hard way. Zach hates Dr. Bones, mainly because he's a horrible boss to his father because he disrespects him a lot. Anyways, you get the idea. Dr. Bones sucks. In this next segment of the book, we cut to Dr. Bones, who's drinking and driving during the evening down one of the roads away from the dig. As he's making his way back home, a fast-moving figure runs across the road in front of his Jeep and makes a sudden stop, where Bones is able to get a good look at it. In front of him was the mother raptor with Honker just kind of chilling in her mouth. I guess he's being carried in there in the same way that crocodiles do with their babies. Anyways, the mother raptor continues on her way, and Bones gets the bright idea to get his gun, get out of his vehicle, and go after the raptor on foot. As you would expect, that doesn't work well for him. He gets chased back, loses his gun in the process, and barely makes it back to his Jeep. The mother raptor does some good damage to the Jeep trying to get Dr. Bones, but he's able to make his escape. But now that he's seen proof of a real-life dinosaur, he's determined to hunt one down, since it would result in immense fame and glory. Also, this book is very weird when it comes to Utah Raptor. At one point during this segment, Dr. Bones had referred to the Utah Raptor as the largest and most terrifying of all the predators that have ever lived, to the point where it was apparently beyond T-Rex. Now, I'll admit, by the way the mother raptor sounds, her size is definitely exaggerated for the story, but if she was beyond T-Rex, I doubt she'd be able to fit in Zach's house. Unless, of course, it was the size of the visitor center in Jurassic Park. I don't really know, the specific size of the Utah Raptor isn't mentioned, but considering everything, keeping its real life size in mind, comparing the in-story raptor with her surroundings, and based on what the characters in the story have said about it, I can conclude that I am really confused still, and I'll just go with it. We go back to Zach and Yuta, who go and meet Yuta's grandmother, who's referred to as Spider Grandma. Spider Grandma runs a concession tent off a road coming into town who sells stuff to tourists like rocks and arrowheads and fireworks. But she also has knowledge and maps of the cave systems and mine shafts that are a part of Silver Mountain, which is where the mother raptor came from. So when the kids go to her and tell her what they had experienced, she of course thinks they're crazy and chalks it up to Zach just being a city boy, knowing nothing about nature or the animals he encounters. Yuta tries to explain that she herself saw it as well, to which Spider Grandma admits that she's heard stories of workers going into the mine shafts of the mountain and coming back with wild stories of deadly creatures that closely resemble dinosaurs. Some made it back, Others didn't. It's been a legend in the town for a while, but most people disregard the claim of living dinosaurs. And while Spider Grandma is still a bit skeptical about this whole thing, she does seem willing to help them, especially since she trusts her granddaughter and her account of the story in actually seeing the dinosaur for herself. However, she's almost certain that while Yuta would make it into the mountain just fine, Zack wouldn't. He's a city boy that doesn't know how to survive in the woods and would easily starve since he wouldn't be able to stomach anything like grubs. So to prove how serious he was, he has Spider Grandma give him a grub that she kinda just has in her tent stored away somewhere, so that he can eat it and show her that he would make it just fine out there. After he does this, Spider Grandma is impressed enough to give him the map that he needs in order to follow the mine shafts within the mountain. He's told to go into a different entrance into the mountain, a commercial cave that used to be open for tourists, but has been abandoned for years, but was considered the safest way to get in. She also gives him a cell phone so she has a way to communicate with them, at least until they get deep enough into the mountain and eventually lose the signal. The following day, Zack and Yuta make their trip and arrive at the entrance point of the cave. For whatever reason, Zack thought it was a great idea to bring Picasso, like he isn't an easy target for any dinosaurs they run into, but whatever, I suppose. They make their way in and follow the map, along with petroglyphs that are also labeled on the map to show them where they are in the cave. Eventually, they make their way from cave systems to mine shafts, where they run into a pack of abnormal wolves that chase them throughout the cave. And unfortunately for Picasso, they ultimately get to him and start eating him alive. Nah, I'm just fucking with you guys. Picasso's with Zack and Yuta, and they're able to get away from them by jumping down a pit that leads to some sort of animal boneyard, presumably for the raptors. They aren't able to get back up from the pit, but there is a cave passage at the bottom that they follow instead. Meanwhile, on the surface, Dr. Bones is getting his team ready with the proper equipment to hunt and possibly capture a dinosaur. His first order of business is to go to the cave where Professor Norak had his accident. He and two of his foremen from the dig show up and inspect the area, where he sends one of them down into the cave that Norak originally found the egg nest in. The foreman goes deep into the cave and eventually finds the nest with the eggs all hatched. Nearby are the raptor hatchlings. However, they're small enough at this point to just look like oversized lizards, so the man doesn't see them as dinosaurs at all, but he thinks they could possibly be a new species of animals that could still bring in some level of fortune to the crew. Hey, remember the Lost World where a pack of Compsognathus managed to take down a fully grown man? Yeah, that kind of happens here, but instead of compies, it's baby Utah raptors. But to be fair to this story, they sound more deadly as a pack than a pack of compies. Anyways, by the time Dr. Bones and the other foreman get to where he's at in the cave, he's completely gone. Going back to Zack and Yuta, they eventually enter a large open area through the passage where they make a very disturbing discovery. Along the cave walls of this opening are large white sacks. Within the mesh of the sacks, made of what looked like thick fibers, were chunks of dead animals. They soon put together that the area they've stumbled upon is essentially a larder for the Utah raptors, which is a room that's typically used as a food storage. The white sacks are meant to keep their food trapped and fresh so that they can get to it later. Soon, there's noise coming from an entrance to the area. Zack and Yuta hide and see that a whole pack of adult Utah raptors have made their way into the room, with a significantly bigger one following behind them. This very large Utah raptor was clearly the alpha raptor of the pack, the tyrant leader that ruled over the rest. The way it's described in the book is that it's twice the size of Honker's mother. It had elongated fangs and cartilage that curved out from the back of its mouth and curled to the point of piercing its own skin like the overgrown horns of a goat. And finally, it had a dark black coat along its back, giving it the nickname Blackback. It's here we finally learn more about the raptors and how they do things here within the cave. As mentioned already, the larder is their storage room for food, and the white sacks are actually produced by the raptors naturally. One of the raptors drags in the foreman's body from earlier, and the blackback begins to devour it. The others wait for their turn, and once they've all had their fill, the blackback begins to regurgitate a steaming fluid within its body that literally cauterizes what's left of the prey's body as a way to seal it up and save it. He then places the leftovers raptors by the wall, where the other raptors begin to spray whiter fluid from their mouths onto the body to create the white meshed sacks that would contain and save them for later. This whole time, Zack and Yuta are watching this horror, and then suddenly the cell phone rings. This captures the attention of the raptors, so Zack does the generic hero thing and runs out to distract them while Yuta and Picasso run for it. Hesitant, Yuta eventually makes her way out of the large area and down the passageway they came from, losing Picasso somewhere in the process. On top of this, several baby raptors notice that Yuta and Picasso are running away and start chasing them down the passageway. Zack ends up being caught by the blackback, and since that he had already eaten his fill, he's instead going to preserve Zack in the larder to keep his body fresh. But before he does that, another weird feature about these raptors is revealed. The blackback takes the tip of its claw and pricks Zack's chin with it, and literally injects him with a fluid as if he's being injected with a needle of some type. The fluid knocks Zack out, and he's placed on the wall where the raptors cover him in the white fluid, which begins to materialize into the thick fiber mesh that eventually becomes the white sacks. Yuta is able to make it out of the cave by herself, but is devastated by losing Zack and Picasso. Spider Grandma calls her again to warn her that Dr. Bones is trying to flood the cave by blowing up a passageway that will allow a bunch of water inside to get the dinosaurs out, and that she only has 10 minutes to get out of there. Earlier in the story, Spider Grandma had paid a visit to Dr. Bones to tell him that he couldn't flood the mountain as there were 2 kids inside there still. Of course, Bones doesn't care and plans to do it anyways. Yuta, who thinks Zack is dead, doesn't feel right leaving him there though. So with Zack's bike, she goes all the way back into the cave. She's able to make it all the way back to the larder with it and sees that all the raptors are gone. She goes to the sack that Zack was in and sees his body. She tries to get him out of there until he coughs, indicating that he was still alive. But the raptors were making their way back into the area, and the mother raptor attacks Yuta. Zack is able to get himself out of the sack after he becomes more conscious, and they hear an explosion. Bones' explosives had gone off, and the cave was beginning to flood. So Zack and Yuta make a run for it. Meanwhile, Picasso has been able to temporarily get away from the baby raptors in a small area of the cave that the raptors can't fit through. But from this spot, they can almost reach him from it. After some time with this, the raptors eventually make it through the small space and start to eat Picasso alive. Nah, I'm just kidding. Picasso's cornered until he hears a familiar sound. Honker, who had befriended Picasso, comes to the rescue and holds his own against the smaller baby raptors. He and Picasso then catch up to Zack and Yuta, but seeing how Bones' men are waiting outside all the entry points from the cave to capture or kill any dinosaurs that make it out, Zack has a change of heart with wanting to bring Honker back with him. Yuta then suggests for them to head out to the east side of the mountain because that's where the Badlands are. The Badlands is a nickname given to a heavily wooded area on that side of the mountain that Honker and the rest of the Utah Raptor pack can go and live off in, as it's very secluded and very much away from civilization, so they will never be bothered again. Zack agrees, and they follow a tunnel to that end of the mountain where they reach a door that leads to the penstock gates of the dam. While this is happening, Bones notices through his control panel that there is activity happening within the dam, but none of his men should be over there, so he goes to inspect it himself and eventually finds Zack, Yuta, and Honker. He holds the kids at gunpoint and tries to get Honker, but right as he does that, the nearby doors break open by the surviving raptor pack, including the blackback, which charges at Bones. He tries to shoot it, but the raptor closes his jaws down on his head, shakes him around, and throws his body down a nearby pipe that leads to turbines. The raptor chases Zack and Yuta towards the penstock gates, where it unfortunately batters Picasso into a cement wall. As Picasso's body lays there motionlessly, Zack leads the blackback to a catwalk near the gates, where they manage to get the penstock gates open to unleash the massive waves of water towards the blackback, which pushes it down to the turbines that lay at the bottom of the dam, killing the monster for good. Zack and Yuta go check on Picasso, who has unfortunately died from the hits. Nah, I'm just kidding. He's just in a little shock and was able to walk it off. He's all good. During all of this, Honker, his mother, and the rest of the pack were able to make it out of the mountain and towards the Badlands. While Zack was unable to see him one last time, he knew they were safe. They reunite with Spider-Grandma and things end on a happy note. Zack, Yuta, and Picasso are all safe, Zack's father is the new boss for the dig since Bones kind of died, and the secret of the Utah Raptors is kept safe. For Zack, he continues to forget the events that had occurred because that was the side effect to the fluid that he was injected with by the Blackback. And I didn't mention this earlier because I kind of forgot to, but Zack's dad was also injected by the same fluid by the mother raptor, and throughout some of the story, it's wondered what could have caused an injury like that. This amnesia side effect to the injection has had the same effect on Zack's dad and has caused him to forget everything in regards to his accident, so he doesn't remember the raptor encounter or the egg discovery that he made. At the end of the day, the only ones that know about this are Zack and Yuta, and the story ends with them going about their normal lives once again. Overall, not a bad read. What surprises me the most about this book is that it was much more gory than I remember it being. I'm kind of surprised I read this in 6th grade. I'm not joking when I say I found this in my school's library, so I don't I don't know why they had such a intense book for kids, but honestly, I'm kind of glad I read it. It's definitely a weird take on dinosaurs that presumably survived for this long after their supposed extinction, but an interesting one nonetheless. I do kind of like the speculative work behind the raptors and their biology. I couldn't tell you how plausible that would be in real life, but there's something terrifying about dinosaurs that can basically inject you with poison, or trap you in a strong white sack, or cauterize your body with steaming fluids. And at that point, I think more than anything, that was all supposed to fit the more horror-based elements of the story than the scientific ones. But I could be wrong about that. What do you guys think? What did you think of this story and the dinosaurs in it? I'd be happy to know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. But that's pretty much it for now. I hope you guys enjoyed this little Halloween special. It was nice to cover some kind of dinosaur horror story, especially since there's not enough of that out there now. If you want to read this book yourselves, the links for where you can find it are in the description below. Thank you all so much for watching, and happy Halloween.